feel like moving from the core barrel into breathing works pretty well because that's usually where most people screw up their barrel.
Yes. So the next segment that we've got to move into is breathing as the basis of core training. So within Pilates principles, whichever background you come from, all Pilates methods start with breathing as the first principle. So from an anatomy standpoint, with that inhale, when you are taking that deep breath in, your diaphragm is moving all of those abdominal contents inside the barrel downward, and it's giving you stabilization from intra-abdominal pressure. So all of those contents are stabilizing your spine from the inside out, so downward pressure. But then as we exhale, we are bringing that air back up, little contraction of the pelvic floor, the abdominal muscles draw in, the diaphragm rises back up, and you need that draw in of the abs to especially still support the lumbar spine. It doesn't have any ribs attached to it. It has very little stabilization in and of itself. So we're switching back and forth in the breath pattern from this two-sided dynamic stabilization pattern. So inhale, stabilization coming from pressure, and exhale, stabilization coming from muscular engagement. And if you lose either one of those things, if you lose the inhale, you are losing your oxygenation, which is going to feed the power muscles to do their job, as well as not bringing appropriate internal support for whatever power you're going to generate. And then on your exhales, if you're not actively recruiting core, then you are leaving spinal segments vulnerable at a point where they need that muscular support because the air has left the body. So if we're thinking about this barrel or canister, you've got the top and bottom that need to move with each other. So your pelvic floor and your diaphragm need to move down on the inhale and up on the exhale, along with the sides supporting and keeping the length even in both directions, because our deep core muscles, the deepest layer of our abs, the transversus abdominis, work a little bit like a corset to tension the fascia and connective tissue of the midsection of the body. And so with an exhale, what should be happening is, without thinking about it, we should have pelvic floor and deep core engaging. And then with an inhale, we should be bringing air down into the body, releasing those muscles to their lengthened state so that they're staying in a healthy expand, contract pattern. And then movement should be layered on top of that. So any breathing that, or any moving that you do without breathing is already going to be getting off on the wrong foot. You've already moved it to an artificial pattern because it's not being supported in the way it was intended to be. So if our breath leads our movement, then we are less likely to tense extra things to move our body parts. So within Pilates, we would talk about what the breath naturally wants our spine to do. So on an inhale, it wants to lift us into extension and make space for more air within the lungs. And then on the exhale, it wants to flex the spine, contract the core. So we layer in movements that would match what the breath naturally wants to do. So we're using the breath to either harness the power that would come with that movement, or if there's a point where we're unstable, so say I want to go into a spinal extension, I might initially do my back bends with an exhale so I'm aware that I maintain core support. Like Angie talked about, I don't just let go of my abs, but I allow them to lengthen. So there's this continuum of work along the front, back, and sides of the body, whereas one thing is moving down in effort, something else is moving up, and we're maintaining the balance. And the breath is our built-in balancing system. We're not supposed to have to think about it, but if we become dysfunctional in it, that's where we need to go back to layer on top and to build in healthy movement patterns from the core outward.
Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff in PT school I wish they had gone over, because, you know, it took me being out of PT school for the better part of 10, 11 years, you know, being in the PT field for that long, to figure out that breathing is essential, which when I say that out loud, it makes me really feel like I was very book smart and not very street smart. But you definitely give no credit to breathing as the foundation of movement. You just sort of take it for granted and assume that, look, that's just this thing I do on the side, you know, like that's great. And I shouldn't hold my breath when I invert because it's not good for me. Like, that's what somebody taught me once, so that's great. But it's more than that, and you just sort of really summarize how breathing should function. What I see from a PT standpoint is that people, by the time they get to me, they're so bad at breathing, at least breathing with exercise, that they've screwed up other muscles that they shouldn't have been using to breathe. So growing up a gymnast, and obviously a female in a world that was sort of stuck on this ideal body structure and posture, I learned that breathing should only happen in upper chest and neck, because heaven forbid I have a belly. Like, it should never move. It should be sucked in and rigid and completely immobile, right? That's, you know, the background my coaches gave me is hold your stomach in and keep your chest out and your shoulders back all the time. So I have all kinds of neck problems and neck tightness. I have tons of sternal restriction, tons of upper thoracic restriction, because I started using muscles that are designed as accessory breathing muscles, postural muscles in the neck, as prime movers for breathing. So instead of me letting myself breathe, like you said, the diaphragm and pelvic floor as a unit, I locked up my pelvic floor, I locked my diaphragm in a small partial engagement, and I used my scalenes in my neck to crank my ribs up and down. So I was trying to breathe up into my thoracic cavity versus down into my abdominal cavity. And I see this a lot in patients. They come to me with just chronic neck problems and neck tightness. And, you know, if you palpate the muscles on the side of their neck, or even if you're doing it here watching this video, and you feel like you're touching a bone, you're doing something wrong. Your scalenes should not be on all the time for breathing. They should be helping you stabilize your neck and head. So if you are not familiar with this idea of core breathing and breathing with movement that Christine has described, it is highly likely that you are breathing in the upper chest exclusively, and that may be contributing to shoulder weakness, difficulty with inverts. It might be contributing to fatigue while training. You may be the person that describes themselves as having TMJ or tension headaches, and that could be alleviated largely, obviously, by seeing a professional for PT or otherwise. But if you just took a class and practiced some breathing with a Pilates instructor like Christine, and thinking critically about how your abdominals and your pelvic floor should breathe for you, you're going to give your neck muscles and your upper chest muscles a huge break, and let them do the things they're supposed to do, which is, you know, move the shoulders, stabilize the neck and head, assist with posture, but not be the prime movers for breathing and things like that. So this is something that, from a PT standpoint, it makes sense to move back to the foundation to fix other problems. I mean, if you've got issues with psoas, if you've got any issues with QL, meaning you've got chronic low back pain or groin pain, it's likely that you're not breathing right, because you should be moving your psoas with breathing. Your psoas should be stretched with some breathing when you inhale and exhale. And one of the things now in PT I try to do with my patients is get them to use breathing as a way to turn muscles off. So that sort of barrel we talked about before, breathing into the barrel, you can shift the balance within the barrel to stretch the back muscles, or to stretch the lower thoracic musculature, or to help mobilize the obliques and get some side bending back. But in order to do those things effectively, you need to know how to breathe to start. And everything Christine described is where you should be starting from.
And the thing I would add on to that is that emphasis on breathing is one of the reasons that things like Pilates often seem like they're very slow to get started, because you're not going to feel the benefit if it's not built on that foundation. So very often we'll take a pause and an extra inhale and exhale, just like you're talking about, using a breath to relax a particular muscle, and think about sending the breath to a certain area and imagining it softening, and then using the exhale to imagine something else gaining tone. And so until we've built that connection, and it does initially take a few extra breaths sometimes to find it, we may move through very few exercises in a Pilates workout that eventually becomes exercise to exercise to exercise, and you do the whole workout within 45 minutes or an hour. But I know my experience with trying Pilates many times as a dancer before I met the instructor who really thoroughly broke it down for me is I just used all the muscles that were already strong, and I felt worse after because things were tight and there was tension. And so until I had someone slow me down and put in enough props to put my body into position where we really found the right things, I wasn't getting what I was intended to be getting out of the workout. And so I couldn't find those things until I was able to slow down. And it took a lot of breathing at first. And now that has sped up, but that is not where it started for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to want to take a step back when you're really focused on the skills or the training. But that's kind of a great thing right now because nobody's hanging, nobody's training, nobody's taking circus classes other than the Zoom ones that are out there. So if, this is the perfect chance to move back and sort of and when I say move back, I don't mean you're actually taking a step back, but peel back the layers and build your foundation from within to the outside. If you can improve your breathing, if you can improve your core's relationship with breathing, you're going to see immediate strength increases when you do get back on the fabric. Even if it feels slow and it feels difficult in the beginning, that's, again, you're trying to teach your body a new language. So you're not necessarily going to be able to recognize what your body's feeling because it's a new sensation. So I was a huge challenge to coach growing up. And even in my 20s, I felt like if it didn't burn, it wasn't working. So why would I waste my time doing it? And that's led to a lot of chronic problems and injuries. And again, if I could go back and talk to my old self, she wouldn't listen, but I would probably be trying to force her to recognize the value in sort of changing these things. From a PT standpoint, if someone's watching this video and you have any difficulty with, for lack of a better word, bladder control while training, if you're the person that goes up on the fabrics and feels like you're trying not to pee, you need to be working on breathing. If you're the person that feels like your hip flexor is always tight and you're always peanutting it because it just gets tired and fatigued, you need to work on breathing. If you're somebody that gets mid-back, shoulder, or neck tightness after training aerials, you need to work on your breathing. If you're somebody that gets lightheaded when you're training aerials, you get that fatigue, dizziness when you've been upside down for too long, or you have trouble when you're hanging from a cross back straddle or any position where the fabric or the apparatus is pushing on the back of your lower back or your sides, and you get dizzy or headaches, you need to work on breathing. So these are all conditions that actually can be traced back to a problem with the core and an issue with breathing and diaphragmatic control. So if that speaks to you on any intrinsic level, it's time to use this opportunity during lockdown to peel back and start from a foundation.